Good morning and welcome to Today in the Word. Hi, I'm Glenn Schaefer, and I'm glad that you're following along with us as we're dealing with some doctrinal places here in Romans, because that's what Romans is about. Paul's writing to the doctrine of the church, the Romans, but he establishes some very powerful things for us. And today, we're going to address total depravity. I believe this is a very important doctrine, that we see the effects of what sin did to mankind. I don't think we really do. And I understand when we say that's a good old boy, and he'll take the shirt off of his back, he'll do anything for you. I get that. We're made in the image of God. God's common grace works in us. But theologically, when Paul is dealing with total depravity, he's saying that the effects of the fall was total through man. His mind, will, emotions, his spirit, his body, every part of man was affected. So when we say that's a good old boy, what we're saying is from our perspective, from God's holiness, that's not true. From God's holiness, there's only one that's good, and it's God, and that's not us. I know people don't like to say that. They don't even like for Christians to talk like this because, wait, Glenn, you're the righteous of God and you're called to be saint. I know that. But you've got to hear what Paul is laying a foundation for the Jew and for the Gentile, for them not to see themselves, in of themselves, as good. That's important that that be revealed to you. Otherwise, you'll depend upon yourself. When this revelation comes, I remember about 20 years ago praying over this because we were teaching our people about sharing their own story in evangelism. And growing up, I always knew that my story was I grew up around Christianity. I remember praying as a young man. I remember being hungry. Now, I know what sin is, but I never rebelled lifestyle. But I know what sin is. And so I became spiritually proud, in my position. And the Lord began to show me what I would be like without Christ. I saw it. I wept for like 3 days. I really saw it. It's not hard to see. All you have to do is take your propensities and remove Christ and the power of the Holy Spirit out of it. I saw myself as a harsh man. I saw myself as someone who would be married 4 or 5 times because of selfishness. I saw myself as a workaholic. I saw myself as a womanizer. I saw myself as proud and arrogant and boastful. When I saw that, I was so broken. And I said, Lord, don't let me ever forget that I'm like everybody else. And that has humbled, and it brings compassion for people who are in bondage to sin when you say, I'm no different. And Paul is making a theological statement here concerning our total depravity, that there's nothing good in us. That's when Paul says, in my flesh dwells no good thing. And Christians say, don't say that, Glenn, because you're the righteous of God and you're a saint. I know who Christ has made me to be, and I know my positional righteousness, and I know Christ is there. But if you don't get this, you will always struggle with the work of God in your life. You'll always wonder if you're good enough, because that question alone is evidence you don't have this revelation. Because you're not. It's not about you, it's about Him. You say, I don't like that, Glenn, because if I even indicate that somehow I'm less than, and I know God's really made, no, you're focusing on you rather than on God's righteousness. And so Paul lays this out. Listen to what he says to the Jew and the Gentile. He starts quoting out of the Old Testament. There's none righteous, no, not one. He quotes Psalm 14, 1 through 4, and Psalm 53, 1 through 3. They almost say the same thing. There's none who understands. There's none who seeks after God. They have all turned aside. They have altogether become unprofitable. There is none who does good, no, not one. Ecclesiastes 7:20 says there's not one good person under the sun on the earth. None. Let this bring you to the place of total dependency upon the goodness of God. That's what this is supposed to do. For you to see that salvation is by grace and grace alone. And if He chose me, then He sustains me. And that which He began in me, He will accomplish and finish. It's His work. That God Himself will sanctify you. God Himself will sanctify you. Both spirit, soul, and body. And preserve you and keep you. Then he quotes out of Psalm 5:9, talking about us, humans. Their throat is an open tomb or sepulcher, meaning just death comes out. With their tongues they have practiced deceit. Then he quotes Psalm 143, the poison of asps or snakes is under their lips. That's where that term forked tongue comes from. James says it's impossible to tame the tongue. God's not asking you to turn over a new leaf or be a better person. He's saying trust in the power of the Holy Spirit in Him alone. Even your tongue can't be tamed. That means you have to submit your soul to the Spirit of God in your spirit so that Christ comes forth out of you. Not that you become a better person, but Christ who is better lives out in you. Christianity is not about being better for Christ or living for Christ, really. I mean, I understand when we say we live for Christ, but it's really Christ living through us. And then he quotes out of Proverbs 1:16, their feet are swift to shed blood. We're just quick to go do things that hurt people. Destruction and misery are in their ways. And the way of peace they have not known. Then he quotes Psalm 36:1, there is no fear of God before their eyes. Wow. That's us apart from Christ. There's no good thing in us. And when we see that among the wicked, I hear people say, I can't believe people doing such evil things. Think about that. Means we don't have a revelation of how depraved man became through the fall. We just think we got sick. No. We died in our sin. And there's no goodness in mankind. That's why it takes the redemption of Christ. That's why it takes His grace. And Paul's building the case so that we'll see all have sinned and come short of the glory of God. And now by faith alone in the work of Christ do we stand. I just think this is powerful. This helps me. I want you to meditate upon the total depravity. If you have questions, make comments below or email me at glennschaefer@dlc.tv. Thank you for joining me today in the Word.